Machismo. That is the 12th of 14 characteristics of your fascism. And we're going to take a look at that today. These were coined by Umberto Eco. Let's take a look. Since both permanent war and heroism are difficult games to play, the Ur-Fascist transfers his will to power to sexual matters. This is the origin of machismo, which implies both disdain for women and intolerance and condemnation of non-standard sexual habits, from chastity to homosexuality. Since even sex is a difficult game to play, the Ur-Fascist hero tends to play with weapons. Doing so becomes an ersatz phallic exercise. Okay. We're going to have fun today. All right, let's start by taking a look at machismo. And this is by verywellmind, which is like a mental health website. So let's take a look at what they have to say about this. Machismo describes a strong or exaggerated sense of manliness, an assumptive attitude that virility, courage, strength, and entitlement to dominate are attributes or concomitants of masculinity, or concomitants would be like subsets of. Stemming from the Spanish word macho, machismo is a social construction of masculinity common across Latin America and Spanish culture that maps out how men should engage with their gender based on virility, courage, strength, and power. And although this is derived from a Latinx community, it is not exclusive to the Latinx community. The assumptive nature of machismo is traditionally ingrained in men throughout Latinx cultures, and it impacts how they behave, speak, and interact with others, and their role in their household and society. Machismo describes a way of being in which being macho rules. The biggest, greatest, and most prideful men are to be respected by those around them. So what is machismo behavior? We'll look at some positives and negatives, the way they laid these out. Positives could be bravery, honor, sexual prowess. I'm just going to say that may not always be a positive, but okay, that's just me. The negatives are reserved emotions, sexism, dominance, and aggression. Some examples of machismo. Machismo enforces toxic masculinity. Dominance is seen as an admirable trait. Machismo fosters the idea that men are superior to women. Bravery is a positive attribute until it's not. And then it goes on to talk a little bit more about the violence to not only women, but trans women and people of the LGBTQ plus community. So I will link this if you want to read more about this article. The Pew Research Center had an interesting... The Pew Research Center had a really interesting take on this. They did an article in December of 2024, so not that long ago, what U.S. Latinos say about machismo. While machismo has multiple meanings to Hispanics, most view it negatively. So for Hispanics living in the United States, conversations about gender can include discussions of machismo, a concept that generally captures ideas, behaviors, and expectations related to men and masculinity that is sometimes attributed to Spanish-speaking cultures. So let's take a look at this. Most Hispanic adults say machismo among Hispanics is a bad thing, and that is 73% say it's a bad thing. 18% like, meh, and only 7% think that machismo is a good thing. So I want to take a look here now at, this is Ruth Ben-Ghiat. This is a presentation that she did. She wrote a book called Strongmen, How They Rise, How They Rule, How They Fall. She's been on a lot of the speaking circuits talking about this strongman ideology, and we're going to take a look at some of the fascists and the ways that their machismo has played out.
So Machismo. Machismo, so Strongmen was the first book that really took machismo seriously, and I elevate it to be a tool of rule just as important as propaganda, as violence. And women are as much the strongmen's enemies as prosecutors and the press. So are LGBTQ people, whose persecution is a through line over 100 years of authoritarianism. And the gender politics of authoritarianism has three pillars. One is institutionalized misogyny. So you're putting women down, taking away reproductive rights. At the same time, you're pumping up men. You're exalting hypermasculinity. And then the third is you're suppressing other models of manhood and sexual identities. And that's the persecution of gays and today trans. So Mussolini and Putin, they bookend. They are the two leaders who made the most use of their body, the half-clothed, half-naked body. And so here, this is very interesting. So he's being a man of the people. So he's threshing grain with peasants. But he's got these state-of-the-art pilot's goggles. So he's different. So you can't just be the man of the people. You must be the man above all other men. And then here we have Putin on his every man's fishing vacation, but he's not every man, of course. Now, what's also interesting, and I track this among the sitting leaders, when do they dose out this hypermasculinity? Well, when they have problems, challenges to their rule. So 2019, the biggest protests in Russia for many years, Putin decides to go with his biker friends, wearing a leather jacket. So here's Trump, who I really wanted to include this in my book, but was unable to get permission. Now, he can't use his own body, so he borrowed Sylvester Stallone's body from Rocky III. Now, the reason I have this is a personality cult product because, sadly, pathetically, this is not a retweet. He made this, or somebody made this, and it's an original tweet from his now suppressed account. So, we can laugh at things. It's ridiculous, right? As you could say, it's grotesque. But the strongman's masculine identity is not empty posturing. It's a sophisticated strategy of political legitimation. The appeal of these leaders lies in their ability to get away with things that ordinary men cannot. And that's how we get to corruption. Getting away with it is the essence of authoritarianism.
Okay. Now let's hear what our Mr. Vance has to say about men and masculinity.
My message to young men is, I think that our culture sends a message to young men that you should suppress every masculine urge. You should try to cast aside your family. You should try to suppress what makes you a young man in the first.
Okay, nobody wants this. What we want is the suppression of toxic masculinity and dangerous and violent masculinity.
First place, and I think that my message to young men is don't allow this broken culture to send you a message that you're a bad person because you're a man, because you like to tell a joke, because you like to have a beer with your friends, or because you're competitive. It's...
Okay. So the problem with this is not just that that it becomes toxic. I mean, it's very specifically and explicitly toxic, but it's also very dangerous. So we're going to take a look now at oh, I had that in the wrong spot. That's okay. I got a new toy. I got a new toy. Let me show you my new toy. Can you see it? It's a Stream Deck, and I am learning how to play with it. So forgive me if my things are... Oh! Okay. Anyway, I'm having fun with my toy. That being said, let's take a look. Oh, what is misogyny? Make sure I'm in the right spot here. Yes. Okay. Misogyny involves punishing women for challenging male dominance. It may be rooted in hatred for women, but it is not the same as sexism. Misogyny is often conflated with sexism, or the hatred of and discrimination against women. It is a term often used to describe extreme acts of violence against women. Words often evolve as culture shifts, though. This was the case in 2012 with Julia Gillard's speech in Parliament while serving as the Prime Minister of Australia, when she called out the leader of the opposition's behavior as misogynistic. Australia's Macquarie Dictionary even expanded its definition of misogyny to refer to an entrenched prejudice against women following this event. So, of course, we have to take a quick look at what she had to say.
I call the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and I rise to oppose the motion moved by the Leader of the Opposition. And in so doing, I say to the Leader of the Opposition, I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. I will not. And the government will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny by this man. Not now, not ever. The Leader of the Opposition says that people who hold sexist views and who are misogynists are not appropriate for high office. Well, I hope the Leader of the Opposition has got a piece of paper and he is writing out his resignation. Because if he wants to know what misogyny looks like in modern Australia, he doesn't need a motion in the House of Representatives, he needs a mirror. That's what he needs. Let's go through the opposition leader's repulsive double standards, when it comes to misogyny and sexism. We are now supposed to take seriously that the Leader of the Opposition is offended by Mr Slipper's text messages, when this is the Leader of the Opposition who has said, and this was when he was a minister under the last government, not when he was a student, not when he was in high school, when he was a minister under the last government. He has said, and I quote, in a discussion about women being underrepresented in institutions of power in Australia, the interviewer was a man called Stavros. The Leader of the Opposition says, if it's true, Stavros, that men have more power, generally speaking, than women, is that a bad thing? And then a discussion ensues and another person being interviewed says, I want my daughter to have as much opportunity as my son. To which the Leader of the Opposition says, yeah, I completely agree, but what if men are by physiology or temperament more adapted to exercise authority or to issue command? Then ensues another discussion about women's role in modern society.
Really,
and
people
the
are not
other
happy about
person
this.
participating in the discussion says, I think it's very hard to deny that there is an underrepresentation of women, to which the Leader of the Opposition says, but now there's an assumption that this is a bad thing. This is the man from whom we're supposed to take lectures about sexism. And then, of course, it goes on. I was very offended personally when the Leader of the Opposition, as Minister for Health, said, and I quote, abortion is the easy way out. I was very personally offended by those comments. You said that in March 2004. I suggest you check the records. I was also very offended on behalf of the women of Australia when, in the course of this carbon pricing campaign, the Leader of the Opposition said, when the housewives of Australia need to do what the housewives of Australia need to understand as they do the ironing. Thank you for that painting of women's roles in modern Australia. And then, of course, I was offended too by the sexism, by the misogyny of the Leader of the Opposition catcalling across this table at me as I sit here as Prime Minister. If the Prime Minister wants to, politically speaking, make an honest woman of herself, something that would never have been said to any man sitting in this chair. I was offended when the Leader of the Opposition went outside in the front of Parliament and stood next to a sign that said, ditch the witch. I was offended when the Leader of the Opposition stood next to a sign that described me as a man's bitch. I was offended by those things. Misogyny, sexism, every day from this Leader of the Opposition. Every day, in every way, across the time the Leader of the Opposition has sat in that chair and I've sat in this chair, that is all we have heard from him. And now, the Leader of the Opposition wants to be taken seriously. Apparently he's woken up after this track record and all of these statements. He's woken up and he's gone, oh dear, there's this thing called sexism. Oh my Lord, there's this thing called misogyny. Now who's one of them? Oh, the Speaker must be, because that suits my political purpose. Doesn't turn a hair about any of his past statements, doesn't walk into this Parliament and apologise to the women of Australia, doesn't walk into this Parliament and apologise to me for the things that have come out of his mouth, but now seeks to use this as a battering ram against someone else. Well, this kind of hypocrisy should not be tolerated, which is why this motion from the Leader of the Opposition should not be taken seriously.
Okay, this goes on for quite some time, and I would highly recommend that you give this a listen, because damn, she had a lot to say. Oh, and she said what a lot of us wish that we could say and just have never quite found our voice. Anyway, take a look at that. I'll put the link in the description. In 2015, however, a study analyzed 216 articles that were published in the Australian print media in the week following Gillard's speech to explore how this accusation of misogyny was dismissed, minimized, and undermined, and found that these predominant constructions not only serve to maintain and justify gender inequalities, but also function to reproduce and perpetuate them. So I want to look a little bit at how to recognize misogyny. And we're going to also talk in a minute about misogynoir and transmisia. And so these kinds of behaviors are similar across all three. So we'll just go through them one time. These include expressing hatred for women, catcalling or harassing women, favoring men at the expense of women, strong belief in rigid traditional gender roles, no respect or regard for women's time and effort, ignoring or speaking over women, rejecting women's ideas, stealing ideas from women but refusing to credit them, frequently interrupting women when they're speaking, blaming women for conflict and expecting women to maintain social harmony. So the chaos is our fault, but at the same time, we are the ones who have to hold everything together. Okay. Punishing women for calling out discrimination and sexism. The causes of misogyny, I'm not going to go too deep into this. Experiences, upbringing, cultural factors. Honestly, I don't give a fuck where it comes from. Just stop it. The impact of misogyny can include an increased risk of developing clinical depression, more psychological distress, worse mental functioning, poor self-rated health, and lower life satisfaction. And then it goes on to talk a little bit about some of the places that they've seen it online. And then the types of misogyny, and I'm going to touch on this again in a moment. Misogynoir is a specific subtype of misogyny that involves contempt and prejudice directly, specifically against Black women. And then this was coined by Moya Bailey, and I'm gonna talk about her in just a minute. And then transmisogyny, which refers to the prejudice, hatred, and oppression directed toward transgender women and trans feminine people. It describes an intersection of misogyny and transphobia. Tips to deal with misogyny: don't ignore it. Call out misogynistic behavior when you see it and make it clear that it is not acceptable. Report it. In work settings, talk to your manager or human resources department. Leave the situation. Setting boundaries can be helpful, but it is often best to leave the situation if possible. Create safe spaces. Support and uplift all women. Work to become more aware of the damaging effects of internalized misogyny and how it can lead to the punishment of women who challenge the patriarchal status quo. And care for yourself. Practice self-care and relaxation strategies to deal with stress. And in here, it talks about it. I think I might have skipped over the paragraph, but it talks about how it is not just men who perpetuate this, but oftentimes it's other women who perpetuate this misogyny against other women. And we need to stand up for each other. Yeah. Ladies, women, I'm speaking to you. We need to stand up for each other and stop tearing each other down. Now, I found this really funny. So in the verywellmind website, they, at the end of the articles, they will kind of link like related articles. And so the article that was related the most, according to them, to an article about misogyny is gynophobia. The fear of women. Which, I don't know. What's the implication here? Perhaps that misogynists are misogynistic because they are scared of us. Okay. Whatever. You do you, boo. Okay. We saw her. Oh. Ugh. Okay.
Kamala Harris in attack mode as she hit. Kamala Harris in attack mode as she hit swing state Arizona, seizing on Donald Trump's latest inflammatory comments about women.
He does not believe women should have the agency and authority to make decisions about their own bodies.
Trump made the remark in question during his rally in Wisconsin.
My people told me about 4 weeks ago, I was saying, no, I want to protect the people. I want to protect the women of our country. I want to protect the women. Sir, please don't say that.
Because who are we protecting women against? It's other men. All right, come on. You come over here. Hi, this is Oslo. He's going to hang with me today.
How his staff told him that kind of statement is inappropriate.
I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not. I'm going to...
Damn! Whether the women like it or not, that is straight up abusive behavior. Okay. Mm-hmm. Let us take a look at what is misogynoir, because all of these are kind of related. Misogynoir. Oh, and this was, I love this. This article I found in developdiverse.com. And what this is an organization here to make language more inclusive, starting by improving companies' recruitment and employer branding content with actionable instant feedback. Our DEI software, remember, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Our DEI software and services are research-based, actively working toward creating a positive social impact. We aim for growth, knowledge sharing, and raising awareness. So if you happen to have a company and you're looking for someone to help you with your DEI initiatives, because we are in the resistance, we don't give a fuck what Donald Trump has to say about eliminating DEI, because DEI is not the evil thing that they portray it to be. DEI uplifts all people. DEI is not just good for marginalized people. It is good for all people. Anyway, that's who this is, and this is what they say about misogynoir. Misogynoir refers to the dislike of, contempt for, or hatred against Black women, typically exhibited by both non-Black and Black men. What is misogynoir? Misogynoir originates from the term misogyny, which refers to a deep-rooted prejudice and hatred towards women. However, misogyny takes this concept further by specifically addressing the experiences of Black women within the framework of racism and sexism. The term was coined in 2010 by Black feminist Moya Bailey, and I do have here, we're not going to look super deep, but I will link her website so that you can learn a little bit more about who she is and what she has done. Misogynoir represents the intersection of racism and sexism, addressing anti-Black discrimination that targets both cisgender Black women and transgender women. As a concept, it's still in its infancy, but shows how different social identities intersect within systems that are marginalizing, and oppressive. Some of these identities include race, gender, and sexual orientation. Misogynoir, misogyny, racism, and sexism. Misogynoir is a subtype of misogyny that deals specifically with racial and gender prejudice toward Black women. It is fueled by toxic stereotypes that generally perceive Black women as angry and strong or hypersexual. Misogynistic attitudes toward Black women are common in both non-Black and Black patriarchies. However, it is most commonly used to describe the misogyny that Black women experience from within the Black community, primarily from Black men. As with misogyny in general, this is a form of sexism used to keep Black women at an inferior social status in order to preserve the traditional roles of patriarchy. Sometimes it can manifest in obvious ways through aggression and violence. Other times it is more subtle in the form of microaggressions, dismissive attitudes, or objectification. Types of misogynoir can include gender discrimination, sexual harassment, objectification, male privilege, violence against girls and women, microaggressions, and transmisogyny. So I wanted to also take a look, because these are all intertwined, in transphobia. Now, the reason I put this particular page up is because when I just put in what is transphobia into the Google search bar, aside from like straight up dictionary references, like from dictionary or from Wikipedia or from Merriam-Webster, the first page, and I'm in the United States, the first page shows an article from the UK. It does show a Planned Parenthood article, which we're going to look at in just a moment. There's an article from the University of Edinburgh. There's an article from Young Scott and an article from New Zealand. So on the front page, almost all of the articles that were not specifically from like WebMD or dictionary were not from the United States. Yo, do better. We're going to take a look at the one from Planned Parenthood. This is a very hefty article, so we're not going to go through all of it, but I really do want to talk about this interesting concept that there's a difference between transphobia and transmisia, and we're going to look at why that's important. Transphobia and transmisia are when people have deeply rooted negative beliefs about what it means to be transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming. Their beliefs affect the way the government, organizations, the media, and society generally treat people whose identities don't fit into typical gender roles. Transphobia results in policies that take away the rights and safety of trans and non-binary children, teens, and adults. This results in discrimination, harassment, and sometimes violence against people who are not cisgender. What's the difference between transphobia and transmisia? And here's what I find really interesting. Transphobia and transmisia are basically the same. However, transphobia means to be fearful of transgender people, which isn't an accurate way to talk about oppression. Here's why. In medical language, phobias are anxiety disorders. So saying transphobia is unfair to people who have actual phobias. But more than that, even if someone has a fear about trans and non-binary people, like fear of the unknown or a changing world, it isn't a phobia. Because transphobia sounds like an individual condition, the word downplays systems and institutions that harm trans and non-binary people. Transphobia is now referred to as transmisia. The misia in transmisia means hatred. This is a helpful word because it highlights the prejudice at the roots of beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, and systems that hurt or deny the existence of trans and non-binary people. And then this article does go on, and I'll link it again in my description, but it goes on to talk a little bit more about what transmisia does to communities of trans women and trans men, honestly. And they all seem to be kind of intertwined. I mean, ultimately, all of these forms of misogyny are not just individual actions against people, but they're systemic. They are systemic, and they are harmful and hurtful. Okay, now, I found an article that actually it was written in 2020, so before the 2020 election, but after Trump had had an opportunity to fuck the country up for 4 years. And this author specifically addressed the article that we started with, which is this Ur-Fascism from Umberto Eco. And he writes, this is just really good. So let's just look at what he writes. Trump's ersatz phallic exercise. And ersatz is like slightly inferior to, and phallic, of course, meaning a male parts. So what this saying is, this is a way that men, particularly in this case Trump, can use other things to kind of compensate for whatever they're feeling they need compensating for, if you know what I mean. Okay, so anyway, economic collapse won't keep him from delivering to his base. It's a common question. What have the president's ordinary supporters gotten out of their deal with him? The answer is just as common. Not much. Before the pandemic, the only material outcome of backing Donald Trump was a slight decrease in their federal income taxes. Other than that, gains have been performative, not substantive. Some say that's enough to sink an incumbent. If he can't deliver for his base, then he can't win re-election. If he presides over a fragile economy, as is currently the case, then he's bound to lose. But what most people don't understand is that Trump is delivering. And he will keep delivering even if the economy collapses. The deliverable doesn't come in the shape of economics, policy, or law. It's entirely psychological. Umberto Eco's phrase from his essay, Ur-Fascism, helps explain one of the main contradictions of Trumpism. Think of it this way. Remember those men at anti-quarantine protests strolling around the state capitals carrying semi-automatic rifles? They said they were protesting stay-at-home orders. They said their goal was demonstrating their rights to bear arms, individual liberty, and personal sovereignty. But that wasn't their immediate goal. Their goal was intimidating peaceful and unarmed protesters. Their goal was deriving pleasure from the fear of seeing men brandishing weapons, the likes of which have massacred thousands in mass shootings around the country for the last decade and a half. Their goal was savoring the flavor of gaslighting someone into thinking their goals were high-minded and pure rather than what they were, low and barbarous. And this is from Eco's article. Since both permanent war and heroism are difficult games to play, the Ur-Fascist transfers his will to power to sexual matters, wrote Umberto Eco in his 1995 classic Ur-Fascism. This is the origin of machismo. Since even sex is a difficult game to play, the Ur-Fascist hero tends to play with weapons. Doing so becomes an ersatz phallic exercise. And many thanks to Charlie Sykes for reminding me of Eco's essay. I've tried coining a phrase capturing the essence of Trump, but I don't think I'll ever come close to the elegance and accuracy of ersatz phallic exercise. This is what the president delivers. This is what he will continue to deliver even if the U.S. economy falls into a full-blown depression. Trumpism is a mirror, a fetish, you might say, more than it is a political ideology. The key to understanding his presidency isn't what it is, but what it isn't. It isn't governing according to morality, the Constitution, and the law for the benefit of all Americans. That takes lots of time. That takes lots of labor. That's not nearly as fun as swinging your phallus around to the horror of the snowflakes. Okay, let's take a look at what that looks like.
But Trump wasn't just giving off dark vibes. He was also giving off a weird sexual energy.
I came in today, I said, and you know, this is after 4 of these things. I mean, in all fairness, I mean, I'm a human being, right? I come in, and here's the problem. I said, oh man, it's too low. Way too low. Way too low.
What are we doing here, people? I hate to say it, but can we please go back to the hand job routine, please?
Okay. Ersatz phallic exercise helps explain one of Trumpism's key contradictions. On the one hand, supporters say that he's a manly man and that his manliness is why liberals, Democrats, and never-Trumpers hate him. On the other, Trump is a fire hose of whining. He pules and keens at the slightest offense. Let's look at what does that mean. He pules, which means a distressed baby puling in its crib with whine and whimper. And keen. The second definition of keen, the verb, it is to make a loud and long cry of sorrow, like mourners keening at a funeral. He pules and keens at the slightest offense, real and imagined, but mostly imagined. He can't take hard questioning. He'll blame anyone for his mistakes. You'd think a manly man would have skin made of iron. Trump's is made of onion paper. But that doesn't matter to his supporters because consequences don't matter. And consequences don't matter because there's always a way of escaping accountability when intellectual dishonesty is the lens through which one engages the world. What matters is impulse, urge, appetite, and itch, and other neurological bliss points. You don't swing your phallus around wondering what the outcomes might be. You swing it around because your lizard brain demands that you swing it around. If you need a reason for horrifying some bystanders, you can later on fabricate one out of thin air. Those who take responsibility for their actions will always seem weak to those who do not take responsibility for their actions. That's just the way things are. But let's not pretend ersatz phallic exercises are tougher, stronger, and manlier than virtue. Virtue is derived from the Latin vir, which means man. Virtue among ancient Romans leaders, who were nothing if not men's men, privileged it above all other qualities, as it connoted valor, excellence, courage, and the strength of character. Real virtue is harder to put into practice. It takes lots of time. It takes lots of labor. Even so, it too can be a source of profit and pleasure. Okay, so to end this, so basically what we've talked about here today is that Trump and other fascists use their own perception of their own manliness to push people around, to push other people down, to lift themselves up. And what's happening now is that we're seeing it systematically being put into place, because right now the people who are being let go from positions of power are women, are Black people, are brown people, are Asian people, are LGBTQ plus people, are trans people. So everybody who is not a white male cis het gendered Christian nationalist is just fucked. Because why not? And in a lot of really pitiful ways, it all just comes down to this. That they feel insecure about their manliness, and so they have to hype it up. So we're going to end today with a little fun.
They got Trump as a soldier? Trump with lightning hands? Trump as a robot? But, like, why don't any of these cards show off his amazing policy accomplishments? Like Like, where's a card showing Trump tackling a doctor who's about to perform an abortion? Like, where's the one of him heroically catapulting a refugee child far away from his family? Oh, was that too much for you? Or how about one of him patriotically lighting a tiki torch for a neo-Nazi? Oh, yeah, those was the days, y'all. Those was the days.
Okay. So I'm snarky positivity, which means I always end on a positive note. And today I have a really positive note. And that is this. When I think about the women that I follow, and I follow a lot of people on TikTok. That's my social media platform. It's the one that I love the most, although I'm moving over to YouTube because who knows what's going to happen with the tickety talk. But I follow a lot of women on there, and some of those women are so badass that I just like I laugh at the image of any of these teeny tiny little short dick men coming after any of these women and trying to subjugate them. I mean, it's just... So I have pulled up for you a few of my very favorite women who I do not see rolling over for him. The first one is White Woman Whisperer. Now, she got a lot of hate when the bear versus man conversation was happening, and all of the white women were super happy to jump on the, yeah, I would absolutely choose a bear over a man, which, I mean, it's not wrong. They're not wrong. But then the White Woman Whisperer got up and said, if black women, would you rather be in a conference room with a white man or a white woman? And most of black women said they would rather be in a conference room with a white man because at least they wear their racism out in the open, where a white woman's racism remains hidden for a really long time and comes out at the most opportune times. And I was like, damn, she surely doesn't mean me. And then I took a longer, harder look at me, and I was like, oh shit, she means me. Absolutely, she means me. And that got me started on a very, very intense journey, which actually is part of what got me to here to YouTube, because she really made me think. She made me do a lot of self-reflection. So it can be difficult if you're not ready to face the mirror. She might not be your cup of tea. But if you're ready to do the work, absolutely follow White Woman Whisperer. And next is a fairly new... I don't think she's a new creator, but she's fairly new to doing lives on her own. So she's been popping into other people's lives for quite some time, but now she's just started doing her own lives. Her name is Lainey, and I adore her. And let me just tell you, when I am in Lainey's live rooms, I just feel like we're going to be okay. You know, like we're going to get through this. Like, she just has this most confident and just powerful, calming presence. And she is wicked smart. Wicked smart. I mean, holy shit. So if you ever just are like needing to be in a space where you're like, the world is chaos around me, I need to be in a settled space, go to Lainey's page, because she will do that for you. And finally, there is a movement among TikTok women to include in their names, and you can see here a bunch of these, and it was started, I believe, by Left Jess, Manditas Banditas, and Melly. I think Melly is her name. And they put MBW in their names, and that stands for Misbehaved Women. And it comes from, I think there was a quote that said, history is rarely ever made by well-behaved women. So they've started this, and a bunch of other people, Victoria for Congress is another one, Swiss Shenanigans, and a couple others down the road, who have put MBW in their name. And also now there are men on TikTok who are putting MBM in their names. And it's just it's a sign of the resistance. And I wanted to show you one of I think this was how they introduced themselves to the world, because they've only been doing this as a group for a few weeks, but here it is. Oh man, I just love it. I mean, can you just even picture? Can you even picture anyone coming for these badass women? I mean, I'm just saying. I'm just saying. Oh, we got a lot of fight in us. We've got a lot of fight in us. Thank you for hanging with me today. I'm Snarky Positivity. Please subscribe if you like the content. Subscribe. I'm working to build up my subscriber base. And I am really enjoying doing this. I'm learning alongside of you. And I would love to hear from you what it is you would like to learn about. We've got 2 more characteristics of Ur-Fascism coming. And then after that, we are free to just explore other things that are happening in the multiverse. So thank you for being with me. I'm Snarky Positivity. Okay, bye.